Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast with Amy Wheeler. I've had the good fortune to travel the world learning about yoga therapy on a global scale, and I've been able to meet many of the leaders in the field along the way. I want to share with you what I'm learning as I interview our colleagues from around the world. My hope is that together we can reduce suffering of all sentient beings through our work as yoga teachers and yoga therapists. Hello and welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour. I just wanted to have a shout out to all of our listeners. I've been watching the number of people grow that's listening to this podcast. And right now, I just want to share with you some of our analytics that I am so excited about and so grateful for. We have about 8,700 downloads in the first 6 months. And that's about 400 downloads per week. And that number just keeps going up. A few weeks ago, we were at 336 downloads a week. So we're growing really quickly. In the last 30 days, we've had almost 2,000 downloads. And one thing that's really fun for me to look at is the different countries that people are listening. So I just want to tell you quickly all the different countries that our listeners come from. So when you hear your country, just give a little woo woo. United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, Nicaragua, Sweden, the Philippines, Mexico, Portugal, Belgium, New Caledonia, Denmark, Switzerland, India, Japan, Singapore, Italy, Zimbabwe, Ireland, France, Austria, Egypt, Poland, Belize, and Norway. So thank you to all of our dear listeners from all of those countries. We are so happy to be with you on a weekly basis all over the world. As you know, a big part of this podcast is to bring the world of yoga therapy together so that we're all talking no matter where we're from. Now, if you're from a country that has yoga therapy and you want to be heard, I would love to invite you on the show. Sometimes it's difficult with different languages. So it's especially wonderful if you're from a country and you speak English so that most of our listeners can understand. But there are even times where we're willing to try to figure out how to get it translated if we need to. So just welcoming all of our international friends and yoga therapy family. We are booked on the podcast with interviews through May of 2022. But as we get into the new year, I will be asking more people to come on. And that's where I think having our international community come and talk about what's going on in your country would be just fabulous. So thank you for listening. And I introduce you to our guest today. Welcome, Indu. It's so wonderful to have you here. I admire your work so much, and I feel really honored to get to interview you, and especially to kind of ask you about who you are, your history, where you've come from, how you got where you are. So welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me. And it is my pleasure to be here and have this conversation with you and through you to many. I am from India. I was born in India. That's where all my upbringing and studies are from, whether it is academics or yoga studies and Ayurveda studies. And then the karma, the life, the dharma wheel brought me here to United States. And it's wonderful. The beauty of it is I still do what I love to do every single day of my life.
And you were an adult when you came to the United States, right? You didn't come as a child.
No, I came here in my mid-20s.
Okay. Wow. Well, I don't want to go there. I want to go back to your childhood, because one thing that ever since I've known you and the seminars I've taken with you, both in person and online, I feel a sense of lineage coming through you. I feel a sense of your DNA is like this tapestry of Ayurveda and yoga. There's just a different feeling I get when I'm listening to you. And it's not good or bad. It's not that you're better than some other teacher. It's just there's an authenticity there that I don't see very often in especially the United States and yoga today. So can you take us all the way back to like, what was your childhood like? If you had, gurus, if your mother and father, I mean, we don't need like your whole autobiography, but just so we can get a sense of who you are and how you grew up in India.
Well, let me take you to my family.
Okay.
Growing up in India, it was a joint family, which means my father's elder brothers, my grandmother, we were all living together. It was a family of 17 people. And when you live together with so many people, apart from the different dynamics of different people that you get to learn and adjust from a very young age, the biggest blessing that I count is the ability to learn from so many different voices, the ability to soak in their wisdom. So before my formal studies began of Yoga and Ayurveda, which I would count began at the age of 16, informally, I started studying all these subjects from my mother, who I would witness every day practicing Ayurveda in kitchen, changing the spices, changing the lentils, and changing the foods and vegetables and what she would make at home based on seasons. So even before I learned about what is seasonal routine, it was an indirect, learning and passive just by observation through her. And to see her chanting mantras, just waking up to that sound. And my father would practice this Abhyanga oil massage and practice asanas and pranayam. It was just a way to absorb things at a level and at a time when your mind is still in this forming stage. So things go deeper. But did I know at that time that all of this is happening? Absolutely not. Did I take it for granted? Absolutely yes. Did I cringe at my parents telling me, okay, apply oil on your body or take this herb? Yes, absolutely yes. These things, I think I can say for myself that I learned to appreciate it with time. Mm-hmm. And now when I look back, I see that how everything was so purposeful, so meaningful. And the presence of my uncles and aunts and grandmother got to learn from her things in a way that this was not something that she was teaching. This is who she was. This is how life shaped her. So yes, there is definitely a kind of blessing, and I have immense gratitude for the culture, for the heritage, for the upbringing, because that helps me connect dots comparatively easier.
Yeah, that's what I notice about your teaching is there are so many dots connected. Like when you're talking about, say a certain herb, and then you'll go to the mantra that goes with that. And here's the bhavana, and here's the Vedic astrology around that. I mean, you're just pulling from, I don't know if you really know Vedic astrology and Vastu also, but I just feel like you're able to pull from kind of an Akashic record in your mind. It's almost like an encyclopedia. And maybe that's because it went in there at such a young age and provided this foundation in your mind.
I would add this one thing. I've never considered myself a teacher. I've always considered myself a student. And that is something that has been my attitude, inclination from as long back as I can remember. I remember even in my childhood when I was living in the joint family with my grandparents and uncles and everyone else around, I used to have a journaling notebook in my childhood. And if my grandmother was sharing about a recipe, or I heard something, a mantra or a piece of information that really I found interesting, I would make a note of it. So this is something that I deeply cherish, and I feel that if I can be a good student, I can be a good sharer. That is so important, to have that attitude, to constantly learn and not think that at any point you have arrived. So I would just say that, not encyclopedia, my state of mind is a student state of mind, just to learn in every possible way from any possible source. I remember when I was studying yoga with my teacher, she would say that yoga is inspiration from nature. Don't learn tree pose from a book. Look at the tree. Don't learn the Adho Mukha Svanasana and downward facing dog from the dog. Look at the dog. Learn from nature, because there is flexibility, openness, wisdom.
And truth.
And truth.
Nature does not lie, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And there is no tight compartments there. There is no straight lines there. There is no sharp edges there. Everything flows softly and creates a space.
I love that. Space. I think space inside of our bodies, inside of our minds, space around us. That's where the prana flows, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So do you mind telling us just a little bit more? I know you have had, or I think she's now passed, but you had a yoga guru as well as an Ayurveda guru. Can you tell us just a little bit about that? Because I think there's so many people out there that don't even understand this existed in today's day and age for someone like you.
So I had the opportunity to live with my teacher, my yoga guru. Her name is Shashi Khosla, and she lives in Pune, India. And it was such a I don't know if I wouldn't call it a divine coincidence, what else would I call it, to have met her and to be her first student, because she teaches regular classes on yoga therapy, and it has been decades that she has been doing that. And at the age of 16 was when I first met her, and I remember that moment where it was just, I nodded my head and did a namaskar. And I think that namaskar changed my life. That bowing changed my life forever. And then at the age of 19, 20, getting the opportunity to live with her, which in India is called Guru Shishya Parampara. When you get to live in the Gurukula. Gurukula means the family of the Guru, the place where the teacher resides. And she would cringe if I'm using the word Guru for her. She just simply considers herself a student too, that's someone who is just learning and sharing. But she is my guru. She is my teacher. She has definitely transformed my life since the first moment I met her. And I have learned yoga by living with her, by observing her. A part of it was in the yoga classes she used to lead, and she still does lead about, at that time she used to lead 10 classes per day, 1 hour each. So her classes would begin at 5 a.m. in the morning, and it would go on 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9. Then she would have her breakfast break for about 45 minutes, and then back to classes until 1 o'clock, and then back at around 4 o'clock until evening at 7. And this was every day, 5 days a week. This was not something once a week. And this is something she has been doing for decades. And if you look at her, she's just walking prana and walking tejas, like her eyes shine with brilliance, and her presence is as if you're in the presence of a child, that much energy and vibrance. When you get to live with someone like that, it's just, you learn as much from their silence as much as you learn from what they speak. So I remember my learning was more in the casual interactions with her than in the class. In the classes where I would sit in the corner and just make notes and be present in all of those 10 classes. And she is my yoga guru and Ayurveda guru. And I have learned formally from other teachers too. But this is my root.
And what was it in that first moment when you saw her and bowed your head? What did you know in that moment, or what did you feel?
At times you meet some people, and in their presence, there is something timeless that touches you. there is just a kind of remembrance, familiarity that you cannot put in words in that moment, that you reflect upon and think about that, oh, that was that moment. But there are several moments with her, Amy, and to all the dear listeners, those who are listening to this podcast right now, there is one moment that comes clearly in my mind, and that was when I got to live with her and stay with her. And she used to lead, as I mentioned, these classes starting early in the morning, which means she used to wake up 3:30, 4 a.m. And I knew that that is the schedule of her classes. But think about it. I'm 19. Yes, I know I want to study yoga, but am I like a little bit scattered and a little bit like a butterfly and a little bit like, okay, I'll see what I can get. Really not very focused or very honed into the precious lifetime opportunity that I'm getting? Absolutely. So the first couple of days she observed me that I'm just sleeping through in the morning and coming to the class whenever I feel like, making notes, going back. And on the third instance of when she watched it, she came into the room, in my room, the room that I had, and she looked at me and she said, Indu, I would like to talk to you. And she said that you are here with me to study yoga. What if there is something that I will find which is not compatible with that goal, I will only remind you 3 times. And that is for your 3 bodies, so that your physical body, your subtle body, your causal body listens. But after that, it's your karma. That is it. That was a transformational moment for me. Something about how she said it, and that was with utmost kindness and compassion, but also a very fierce strictness and clarity. And when you kind of speak the truth, because it is the truth, it just changed me. It changed me forever. I hope I never take any teaching moment for granted.
You got the message that you're here to be at class at 5 a.m. ready to go. And I don't need to tell you this again.
Earlier than 5 a.m. I need to wake up at 4 a.m. and I started cleaning the yoga room, brooming it, cleaning it, decorating it with flowers. It was just a shift. It was not to be there when everyone else is there, but to be there prior to that, create space and approach it with humbleness, gratitude, not just for taking it for granted.
We have so much guru abuse and a lot of people say, no more gurus. This isn't okay. There's too much power dynamics. But this is the essence of, I think, what a guru is supposed to be, that we humble ourselves, not to that personality, not to let them control us, but we humble ourselves within so that every moment is sacred and precious. And that guru is just a reminder to us about the sacred, precious nature of these teachings that we're receiving.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And may I add just one thing about this subject? One is, in my humble opinion, a true guru will never like to be called guru. One, that is, I think it's very important for us as students. And I'm talking about myself as a student here, and I hope that it connects to others who are listening as a student state of mind, that it is not just the responsibility on someone who calls themselves a guru. A little bit responsibility comes on us as students to do our due diligence, to not just go by what is someone's bio or what is someone's social media or what is someone's website or how these things are displayed, but to actually look at the person and see if they are living their practice or if they are just talking their practice, if they are just good orators, or there is something transformational about their presence. I think if we start taking our cues from this observation, a real experience, and not so much from what is out there just as words or images, and also be constantly vigilant of red alerts anything that you feel is creating a turmoil, and I'm not talking about because it did create a turmoil in me when my teacher told me to, I'll only remind you 3 times, or stop using any facial cosmetic products. I will tell you how to increase the glow of your skin just by doing yoga practices or just by certain home remedies. Did it create a stir in me? Of course, but it was not the kind of stir that would question the basic belief system or question me so deeply inside that it would blur my discernment. In fact, these things sharpened my discernment. So it is just a humble sharing that be mindful where you study from. Take your time. I think we need to be really vigilant as students that not to just sign up for something because it is trending. Is it really something that comes from your heart to study that subject? Or we just want to do it because my friend is doing or many people are doing and I want to gather that certification? Take a pause, because learning or education is a kind of food which is very difficult to get rid of. It's more difficult to unlearn than to learn. And when we learn something spending years, it becomes a part of our ahamkara. It becomes a part of our identity. And it can be very difficult to reform that.
Very difficult. I agree with you. I'm sure we're both in a similar position where we would like students to come and be part of our community. But I want the kind of students that have that attitude. If someone comes right away and says, well, if I finish in this quick amount of time, what kind of certificate am I going to get and how much money I'm going to make? I just feel heartbroken. Mm-hmm. I feel like, we're totally missing the point here, that of course we have to be practical in nature, but at the same time, we've started off on a foot that's lost the essence of the sacredness of the experience of getting these teachings, which is a gift. So I want to go into a little bit about, you talked about finding a teacher that resonates with you, that you and your heart feel is actually doing their best to live the teachings. And I assume that means we as students and so-called teachers have to practice our own self-care. And what is at stake if we as students and so-called teachers don't practice our own self-care?
Everything is at stake. Our body, physical health, our mind, emotional health, our relationship with others, self-care has become more like something which is a hashtag and a trend in the past some time. Mm-hmm. And because it has become that, and it has been associated with expensive vacations or spa treatments and so on and so forth, or products, it feels as if it is not for everyone. It feels as if you have to have a certain level of time, a certain level of finances to be able to practice self-care. But self-care is the basic sense of responsibility that we live our life with. It is the basic sense of awareness with which we live our life. And when we are not in touch with ourselves, with our own body, with our own mind, with our own emotions, something as simple as after having this lunch or after having this meal, how am I feeling? Am I feeling heavy or am I feeling dull? Do I feel bloated or do I feel heartburn? And if I do feel it, not just jump to fix it, but to reflect, go back. Think about it, that is it something about the food, or is it something that I was doing an activity while having the food? Maybe I was watching or reading something that created a stir that affected my emotional state, and along with the food, I also ingested the emotion. Or is it how the food was prepared? I think this awareness is self-care. It really changes everything. It is in fact our first dharma. It is a swadharma, a dharma towards self, to take care of this body. I remember one of my teachers telling me that the biggest dharma is, Indu, to take care of your body, that is the temple in which your soul resides, and then the body of the earth upon which we live. That this is the biggest dharma. Dharma is not the name of something that we do for life, but it is every single moment. And that is an attitude of self-care. Both yoga and Ayurveda texts begin with self-care.
And I think it's so interesting because when people come to these practices, these traditions, that's what they're falling in love with. And then as many go into it as a profession, and again, I'm using quotes around the word teacher and the word profession, sometimes I think we lose our way and we get so involved in trying to share it that we actually become unhealthy. We're driving all over town to 4 different clients in a day. We're not doing a full practice in the first thing in the morning and before daylight breaks. We're not connecting with Mother Earth on a regular basis. And then there's this weird disconnect where you're trying to teach others, but you're not doing it yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely point on, Amy, that even if we can teach in the best of the ways, the best of the language, and the best of the structure that we can form, I think there is a non-verbal communication that happens between the two people, one who is sharing and one who is listening as a participant. If that person is not living it, the eyes will not communicate the truth. And there is almost a disconnect. Let's say an example, someone as a teacher or as an instructor guiding, relax your toes. And your own toes are tensed. So where is the truth in that? Yes, this word is the same, the sentence is the same, and it has a powerful meaning and suggestion, relax your toes, or may you relax your toes. But if I am not relaxed while speaking about it, there is a disconnect in what I said and what I am. And I think that trickles down to every single thing, what you are sharing, that if it has not touched and transformed you, the sharing, becomes more just a preaching than a kind of living. And something that my teacher, my yoga guru Shashi Khosla used to say, and still says, is that yoga is not to be done. It is to be explored and realized. That it is not something that we get on the mat and do. If we do yoga for 1 hour in the morning or afternoon or evening, what do we do for the rest of the 23 hours? Not yoga. It is everything that we speak, or I think the yoga mat should expand from the 6x3 to the surface of the earth. That wherever you walk in yoga, you talk, you speak, and I know it is a process. Being a student myself, I know it is a process, and there are different levels of truth and realization that you attain. But the one thing that keeps us on the path is sincerity. The one thing that keeps us on the path is that ahimsa and nonviolence, not by just saying something wrong or hurtful to someone else, but by observing that when I don't take care of my body, it is a kind of himsa, it is a kind of violence. When I'm not listening to my gut, it's a kind of violence. When I'm not learning, there is this specific term in Ayurveda, which is called pragnya aparadha. And I know some of the listeners may not know some of these terms, but I'll share it with you. Pragnya means the highest intelligence, discernment. Aparadha means the crime of intelligence. When I know that if I'm going to have, just an example again, this whole bar of chocolate or whole bag of popcorn or this much amount of cayenne pepper in my food, I suffer after that, but I don't listen to my body. Or in the same parameter, if I overwork or when I feel the sleep pressure in the evening and I postpone it, whether for the sake of reading something, writing something, or watching a series, doesn't matter, but I do not give in to that sleep pressure. And this is violence, this is himsa. And this takes us away from the truth. that we are. And next time, if we are talking to someone and saying that it is important to take rest, but if we are ourselves postponing the sleep pressure and not living our life with awareness, I think there is a disconnect. And this is just very important to observe those moments and to learn, and at the same time be compassionate. We learn about something in a training or in a workshop, and we expect that right in this moment I get everything, or tomorrow as soon as, or after 100 hours, 200, 500 hours, when I receive the certificate, by this time I should be proficient. That is not kindness. These kind of learnings take lifetime. Amy, I'm sharing with you and to the listeners that the concepts I learned from my teacher, even the basic concepts of prana, apana, samana, vyana, udana, the 5 pranas and how they function and how we calibrate them, I learned about it at the age of 19 from my teacher formally. I get them now.
Right.
It took more than half my life. I'm 44 now. It was 19 when I studied it. It took more than half my life to really understand what these words means. And maybe you will learn faster, but I'm just saying that it takes time, and it takes consistent dedication and sincerity to keep moving and not get overwhelmed by the overwhelm.
Well, then I think what I hear you saying is we can learn these things intellectually. We can all learn about prana, apana, samana, vyana, udana. But when do we feel in our bodies how a pranayama affects one of the vayus? How do we sense and feel how those asanas are penetrating the gunas? Like this takes time and maybe lifetimes.
Yes.
And I think that idea of having self-compassion, I think we all want to live in sattva. We all want to be free of fear. We all want to feel joy. And there's bills to pay, and our brother is mad at us. And, there's so many things that come up. We have ample opportunities to practice all of this.
I think this is important. We always chase a positive experience, but it is not eating. I think the attitude has to be positive irrespective of the negative experience. The positive, I remember every single teacher that I've studied with, I have experienced this, breaking down of me in tiniest of the pieces. When your ego is kind of shattered in tiniest of the pieces that you just study, and I'm okay. I'm absolutely okay to be broken as many times as it takes, because I know there will be this opportunity to regather myself and to empower and to be empowered with those learnings. I think we run away from these experiences that break and shake us. And those experiences are the very moment where you get to pick and choose that how will you be formed now? How are you going to pick yourself now? And what is going to be different? And how is it going to be different? So I really think of all those moments with gratitude. Every single time my teacher said something that really broke me into tiniest of the pieces, and I'm like, who am I? In that moment, who am I? But then slowly over a period of time, you get to gather yourself. And this is important, what you mentioned, the idea of compassion and giving yourself time. It is we are in the age where there was shipping, and then there was 5-day shipping, and then there was 2-day shipping, and then there was 1-day shipping, and then there is now you can go and pick up from the warehouse. We are so used to getting things now that we have almost forgotten that everything doesn't follow that principle. And
nature doesn't follow that principle.
No, it's almost like we are putting, almost like this pressure on a bud to bloom now. No, it takes time. What we are learning now is a seed. what I learned from my teachers, from my parents living with them in the joint family, from my grandmother. I did not get those things then. Those things took time as a seed. And yes, you have to nurture them with awareness that you have something precious and be ready to go through that grind and know that it will blossom and it will flower and it will have that fragrance. But it takes time. And be okay with that. What is the rush? What is the rush? That is, these things are transformational. It will, when you become what you speak, or what you speak is a consequence of who you have become, that thing has so much power because it's carrying the truth.
I just want to sit with that for a moment, because what you just said, I think, is the essence of yoga.
Yeah.
It's not intellectual.
No, it's not. Oh my God, I was able to remember things very quickly at a young age and regurgitate them. But really, as you mentioned, Amy, intellectual understanding and realizational expression are two different things. There is a natural sense of pause in it. There is a natural sense of it's almost as if it has gone through that digestion at different layers of your being. And you're not just saying something, this is who you are. And that makes a huge difference.
I've had these experiences where something will come out of my mouth that is clearly going to cause huge waves in my life. And I wish I hadn't said, but when I ask myself, did that need to be said? Is that right speech? Yes, it is. And it just came out because it's truth, even though it's really inconvenient. I think that's what we're talking about, right?
Yes, there is this. What it brings to my mind, Amy, is this saying from one of the texts that dharma itself protects the dharmi. Dharmi is the doer, the one who is living on the path of dharma. If it is something righteous, if it is something which is not with the intention to harm anyone, which means that my progress may not mean loss for anyone else, and may my loss not mean happiness for anyone else. When it is from that intention where your intention is not to cause harm, it's just maybe to bring awareness. But at times that bitter truth, why the word bitter is always added to truth. Bitter truth needs to be said. If that, there is that saying that the dharma itself protects the dharmi because it is in alignment with the nature. It's in alignment with the laws of nature. That is one thing that's coming to my mind, hearing what you said. And the other thing is, there is these 3 parameters of speech that is talked about in texts, which is hitam. Is it beneficial? Is it purposeful? Is it required? Second, mitam. How much of it is enough? Like, and even at times, this matters even when we are leading a class, yoga class, and we are seeing an instruction of breathe in, breathe out. How many times repetition is enough? Because it is very important. And priyam. Will it add pleasantness? Even if not now, when my teacher said, wake up at 4 o'clock, it was eventually priyam. It was eventually something because I learned from it and I gained something from it. In that moment, it may not be priyam, but it was hitam and it was mitam. She was not rubbing it on me. She just said it once. She said that I'm going to remind you only 3 times. And hitam, it was keeping, and she had no agenda. It was just to that the container, the receiver is ready. So it's very important that when we say something, as and when we can reflect upon these 3 parameters, hitam, mitam, priyam, and know that if it is something virtuous, it is something righteous, don't worry about it. The dharma protects the dharmi. Keep moving on.
I'm going to listen to this podcast, I think, many times, because these types of things are the types of things that cause us great suffering in our relationships. And to have concrete, did you hit these 3 marks? You can, if so, let it go, move on. If not, apologize, right? It's so practical. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to move on to your book on Soma. And it's really intertwined with everything that we've talked about today, because this book emerged from you based on that little notebook that you were writing in as a child, the recipes that you brought forth from your family, the mantras, the mudras, it's all in there. So tell us about this book and how it emerged from you.
This was in making, as you rightly said, from the childhood. I was very fond of learning things that can make life easier, productive, healthier. It was in this time of pandemic, Amy and the listeners, that I started writing down, I started sharing things that, okay, what can we do today to take care of ourselves? What can we do today to take care of our body, our mind, our soul? And I felt that I have had the privilege and the opportunity to learn from so many teachers, so many people. And when I'm saying teachers, I'm not just talking about the gurus, from people, and I'm not talking about just teachings, things that have really transformed me in a way that was very nurturing, very caring. So I would use the word mothering or parenting here, that had this mothering effect on me. So these are recipes. I call them heritage because it comes from my heritage of my ancestors, my family, but also my teachers and also my country. So therefore I call it heritage. And these are things that are ordinarily said. These are things you won't find written in a book. These are things that are oral teachings. These are not specific methods and techniques that we can look into or sutras that we can go to. These are living beings. They are sharing their realized wisdom. And I just thought this is just so important to share it. I cannot hold this treasure just for myself. And how can I make it available? So I wrote this book and made sure that it's an ebook. So because anywhere across the world, anyone can have access to it without having to worry about how many days for shipping and accessing the hard copy. So this is 100 heritage recipes for self-care. And it is all these basic essential practices, which in Ayurveda is called dinacharya, morning routine practices, but things which are accessible, doable, digestible, practical, or 5 essential things that we can do before going to bed, or how to take care of my skin or my hair or my body, or what are some of the basic ways that you can take care of your digestion, of your skin, of your joints, right from kitchen remedies, right from the home pharmacy, or some mantras like this mantra, Koham, who am I? Which one of my earliest teachers at the age of 16 told me to contemplate upon and told me to write on a piece of paper, who am I, Koham, and take a printout and put it right in front of my bed so that every single day when I wake up, I look at it. And at the age of 16, it was so weird that who am I? I know my name is Indu, whatever is my limited understanding of me. It was so weird that what should I contemplate about in this question? But 20 years later, I know that moment, and because of that surrender, that Ishwar Pranidhana, and because of that trust, I did do that practice, just saying it for the sake of saying it. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? So these are even mantras, philosophies like this, which have changed my life. And I hope that many others, that is the hope around it, wish around it. And even something as basic as how to make chai, how to make an authentic cup of tea, not just from a chai masala, not from a premix of spices, but how to pick the spices seasonally, that when it is winter, you use the ginger, fresh ginger. And when it is autumn, you use the cardamom. When it is summer, you use the fennel. So there is this explanation that don't just put a masala in your chai. Use it with awareness. Again, awareness is the key. And live your yoga and Ayurveda. Not just talk about it and look at it in specific asanas or specific techniques of pranayam or specific herb formulations. Look at it in everyday life. And I called it Soma. Soma means the nectar of the mind. And Soma, the motherly touch, is often compared to lunar quality. And because this is from inspirations from those who have mothered me, it is an account of that with the intention that may it touch heart, may it give inspiration to transform lives in simple, doable way.
Thank you for sharing that. I think if there's one thing that I'm seeing we've lost in our society, at least in the United States, but maybe worldwide, it is this idea of being mothered, not just by the woman who may have birthed you, but mothering each other, nourishing each other, supporting each other, loving each other. It just seems to me like we've completely lost that. And I remember once I was talking with someone about autoimmune disease and how I wanted her to understand how important that concept was in terms of her healing. And she really rejected that. She said, that has nothing to do with, which is, it's fine. This is her experience. But I just want to say in general, I think this is so needed. Mm. And especially when it comes from a place like you're bringing it that came through you, your lineage, your heritage, your culture, I just think it's a beautiful offering. What are people saying about it? What has the feedback been?
Well, the most common feedback is it has become the go-to book whenever there is something going on, like just a basic upset stomach or needing some inspiration for the yoga practice today, or just looking for some specific recipe, because it is something that is written for everyday life. So there has been tremendous feedback about its practical aspects, that how it is approachable and digestible. And there is some feedback that I'm receiving about the stories that I have shared from my life. So in most of the recipes, at the bottom of the recipe in the footnote, there is a story where I share about when exactly did I learn that recipe, or what is that moment that really imprinted on my mind that how important it is. So I'm also receiving feedback about, because, we are the stories we live. And each of our life has a story. And it is not one big story. There are tiny stories throughout the day, tiny moments that become stories throughout the day. And getting back to what you were sharing about mothering, Amy, there is this concept in Tantra. And I consider myself a student of Yoga, Ayurveda, and Tantra. There is this idea of this divinity, this goddess, Tripura Sundari, the mother that reigns over the three realms. And you can think of these three realms as the earth, the sky, and below the earth. But you can also think of it as the body, mind, and soul. And that Tripura Sundari, the beauty of health, awareness, and experience, that is all around us. It is not just someone who gave us birth. It is not just someone who brought a healing concoction, a soup for us when we are sick. It is not just someone who said some words of comfort and inspiration. The mothering energy is all around us, only if we see. Only if we stop seeing in one particular direction and open up our eyes to 365 degrees and know that that energy comes from all around, not just from one direction, we will really open up ourselves to this grace, this love, this care that may come in so many unpredictable ways that can change our lives. that can
And I
give us
think,
that healing touch.
yeah, that idea of the mothering energy doesn't have to come from your biomom. It could actually come from a tree.
Yes. Yes.
Or a river or the moon. It's really,
it's where we look. If we start
right.
looking, it's a change of perspective. It's a change of the lens with which we start seeing everything around us.
So, we know yoga is experiential. We know that yoga happens inside of us and changes our perspective so that we're more open to seeing things like this and taking them into our awareness and becoming them, which is kind of at odds with the scientific method that Western medicine likes to imprint. Do you think it's compatible to even have research studies on herbs or recipes or mantra when it's a completely different paradigm? It's from the intellect when yoga is from the heart. Can we bring those two things together?
Yes, we can. Just because there is a gap now does not mean there will be a gap forever. And the science is catching up with this ancient wisdom. Let me give an example. Ayurvedic texts, most of the Ayurvedic texts begin with the chapter of self-care, and the chapter on self-care is called Dinacharya. The daily routine, the nightly routine, the seasonal routine. And these routines are specific practices that are around 3 areas, Amy, which is considered to be the 3 pillars of health in Ayurveda. Diet, your activities, your lifestyle, which means, and rest. Diet, lifestyle, rest. And cut to modern day science, epigenetics, and circadian rhythm, the concept of circadian rhythm. In fact, the word circadian and dinacharya are one and the same. Even to that point, DN, day, dina. What is DN is dina. And charya means routine, and circadian means that which is circular. And routine, dinacharya, means that which is circular, that keeps going on like a routine. So dinacharya and circadian are one and the same words. One is a more modern word and one is an ancient word. Now, let me just connect one more thing. According to the modern understanding of the circadian rhythm, that how circadian rhythm affects everything, and this 24-hour cycle repeats itself in our body in a little bit more than 24-hour time. And this circadian rhythm, which means the movement of the sun and the moon, this affects our sleep and wake cycles. It affects our digestive system. It affects our circalunar rhythm. It affects our rest. And what does the modern science say that circadian rhythm can be regulated by? Hold on. The circadian rhythm can be regulated by, 1, the first activity when you wake up, because that first activity starts your body clock, internal clock. There are 2 kinds of clock in our system. One is the brain clock and one is the internal organs, the body clock. The first activity, think of it, yoga says Surya Namaskar. Ayurveda also says that some physical vyayam or exercise. Modern science, circadian rhythm, says the first activity that you do in the morning sets up your internal organ rhythm. That is number 1. Number 2, what the circadian rhythm depends upon? Your diet. Ayurveda says what is the pillar of health? Your diet. The first thing that you take in resets your digestive system and the rhythm of the 9 organ systems. The third thing that circadian rhythm depends upon is rest. What does Ayurveda say? What is the third pillar of health? Nidra, rest. Not just nidra as in the nighttime sleep. Rest, pause, contemplation, reflection, nap, nighttime rest. It encompasses everything. This is right here, the modern science mirroring the ancient wisdom in the modern language. And I'll just add one more thing, Amy. In yoga, it is suggested to do Surya Namaskar, which is irrespective of the lineage one may belong to, one may be aware of this practice, Surya Namaskar, which is often translated as sun salutation. But when we say salutation, we kind of create a distance. When we say Namaskar, we draw a proximity, a closeness, because these are 2 different things. When we salute, it's a hierarchy. When you do Namaskar, it's an acknowledgement of the sameness. So when we do Surya Namaskar was basically an inspiration that look at the sun, look at the sunlight, be aware that the dawn has broken and it is morning. Modern science, it says that the first ray of light that touches your skin and touches your eyes, there are these special cells in our eyes which are called melanopsin. They are not the same cells that convert the light into image. They are the cells which convert the light into light, and this light travels through the eyes, through the retinal pathway into hypothalamus, there is a cluster of cells which is called suprachiasmatic nucleus, which actually governs the sleep-wake cycles. Yoga says Surya Namaskar, look at the sun. Ayurveda says do Ushapan, which means have a cup of water filled in a copper jar, which is supposed to have this solar qualities, and keep it under the moonlight. And in the morning, take that water. That is your solar drink, because that water is charged by the moonlight and the sunlight. So right there, I'm just trying to give a couple of examples that how these things are so valid. We have just not explored them. And there is a lot of, because there is a lot of just do it and not giving it a pause and connecting the dot, there is also a lot of letting go, because thinking of it as just a belief system, that it is old and maybe it's not important. But there is definitely a connection between all the three, yoga, Ayurveda, and modern science. And may I say, modern science is catching up. It is just catching up. And we give so much relevance and importance to something that can be proved in a laboratory, which, believe me, I am a total science believer and I totally agree with that. But there are certain things like consciousness that are to be believed in the laboratory of our own body and mind.
Beautifully stated. I'm so grateful that you were willing to join us today and have this time together. Indu, I would like you to just spend these last few minutes telling us about what you're doing right now. How can we connect with you? Are you running yoga nidra workshops? Tell us how we can study with you and just be in relationship with you.
There are so many things that are coming up, Amy, and the listeners. There are these trainings and workshops on pranayam that is coming up very soon, but by the time this podcast will be released, it won't be. But there is this Yoga Nidra training coming up next year in person. There is Shavasana training coming up. There is a training on Devi Mahatmayam, the study of the divine feminine. There's a training on mudras that is coming up. Right in the beginning of the year, there is a 3-class series coming up on Selfcare, Beautify, how to take care of yourself, how to prepare your own body wash, face wash, hair oils, and how to understand what true beauty is. So that is coming up right in the beginning of January. And I know that not everyone might be able to join these classes, these trainings. So I do share things that have inspired me and touched me on a regular basis on social media, especially on my Instagram. And I regularly write blog posts on my website, which are in the library section. But more so, the books that I have written so far, one is the Yoga, Ancient Heritage, Tomorrow's Vision. And the second is Mudra, the Sacred Secret. And the third one is Soma. That I sincerely hope that it benefits the readers, those who join. And even though listeners, I have not seen you, I don't know who you are, I feel the connection. I feel honored that you have given your time, your attention to listen to this. And I hope not even 1 second of it goes waste. I hope that the time, the energy, the attention that you're giving in to listen, to read these books, or to join any of these programs, any kind of investment, money, time, energy that you put in, may it come back to you 1,000-fold. And if we don't happen to meet again, I'm just so happy we met now. I'm content that we met through Amy Wheeler, through Yoga Therapy Podcast, through this platform. And I wish you nothing but the best. May you take care of yourself, knowing that self-care is a responsibility. It is your first dharma, and it is it is how we bring change. It is how we bring a tangible change which starts from us to the family, to the community, to the society, to the world. So don't take it for granted. It is not something selfish.
Thank you, dear Indu. I will be sure to put your website, your Instagram in the show notes so people can find you. And I just appreciate that you were willing to spend this morning with us.
It is my pleasure.
Living our lives in a very sacred way with self-awareness, self-reflection, but most of all, patience. We're so used to everything coming fast and being easy and understanding it immediately. We've almost gotten to this point where if it doesn't come fast and cheap and easy, we don't want to do it. I don't have that kind of time. I don't have that kind of, money. I don't have that attention span. And I think that those are the keys to life, that we're willing to slow down and feel and breathe and allow. We're willing to have a seed planted when we're 19 and not even see it come to fruition until we're 43. And to understand that taking things in intellectually is completely different than understanding something cellularly in an embodied way, in a way where it's coming out of us, it's emanating out of us because it is part of us and it has no way not to express. It just is. That's really different than taking in these teachings of yoga in an intellectual way and regurgitating them the next day to try to make a buck. Sometimes I get a little worried that our yoga therapy school may or may not get enough students because we're into this process of slowing down, emptying the cup, allowing it to become part of us over time. Most of our students take at least 3 years to finish the whole program, if not longer. I see them changing. I see them becoming a more content, sattvic version of themselves. And it takes a couple of years of weekly study to come back again and again and again and let it seep through us, going through many seasons of the year. So 3 years, you'd get to go through 3 seasons, 3 falls, 3 winters, 3 springs, 3 summers, and see how the teachings of yoga and Ayurveda affect us as we come around again and again and become more refined and more self-aware. And that's what I want to teach. And I ask the universe every day to allow that process to happen. I mean, it's exactly as Indu said, a lot of times things have to fall apart several times before they come together. And I think that's really even scary for students in a yoga therapy school, because they're wanting to get this degree, get this piece of paper so they can go out and make a living in the world. And of course, that's all important. We all need to survive and provide for ourselves. But I just want to say, I don't want that attitude to come in front of what Indu talked about today, which is this experiential transformation of the body, the mind, and the spirit, and letting it take the time it needs to penetrate into us deeply, to shift our gunas, our fundamental energies, to shift our perception, how we view the world, ourselves and others, our relationships. This takes time. And this is why I got into the yoga world, because this happened to me studying over many years in an experiential way. And that's what I wanted to share. And I continuously say, if it turns out that we can't do it that way because Western society doesn't want it that way, then I will stop teaching. I know that sounds harsh, but I really don't want to share it in any other way than letting it filter through us and help more sattvic, more caring, more kind, more truthful, one day at a time. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I know for some of you, this is a new idea. It's an esoteric idea. For others of you, you're going to say 100%. That's what it's all about. Others will say, well, that's not realistic. That's not practical. And I'll just say, I never claimed to be realistic and practical. I am a dreamer. I do want to share these teachings like Indu in this experiential way, where every single moment of every single day we are feeling them and becoming them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can always go onto our Facebook group. There's a Facebook group called the Yoga Therapy Hour with Amy Wheeler, and go in there and talk about it. I usually post every week the latest show, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. So go for it, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Yoga Therapy Hour with Amy Wheeler podcast. Another nonprofit organization that we like to support through this podcast is the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandram in Chennai, India. They are the source for the teachings of the Optimal State Yoga Therapy School, and we are so grateful. The KYM's Mitra division offers free yoga therapy training to a large number of socially and economically underprivileged children and women in Chennai. Feel free to support them through the link listed below on Red Circle, and we also have details on our website, which is also listed below. And finally, a special thank you to our team here at Optimal State. We are truly a global family. George Mantuan, one of our executive producers. Adam Satchel, senior media producer and sound engineer from the Philippines. Krishna Panchal, a producer from Canada. Modupe Abdullahi, who does the show notes and is an editor for us from Nigeria. And Peter Morley, who wrote and produced the music for this show, who lives in Australia. Find more about Peter's work at www.zenmusic.biz. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.